Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce's Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 30th of July 2024. We'll start in our military aid and equipment video. In fact, the idea that this is a video on its own means there's a few more things to talk about than there has been over the last couple of days. We'll start with an Andrew Perpetua, a sort of rant, if you like, saying, I can't wait until this war is over. Can we please just send like 40 million rounds of artillery ammo and like 5,000 armoured vehicles and stop effing around, please? Vaporize the Russian military. Do people understand how much money everyone would save? All the taxpayers. We had simply ramped up military production in 2021 when we knew Russia was going to invade. We should have dumped like $150 billion into expanding factories then. But our leaders are idiots and people get their news from journalists who care more about clicks than honest reporting. The inevitable damage to world trade and the destabilization of world order will probably cost everyone enormous sums of money in the long run. We traded long-term security and economic growth for short-term politics, and the dumbass politicians will learn nothing from this, and in 5 years they will look back pointing fingers at other people saying they did the wrong thing and it was all their fault. And it will work because nobody actually cares about anything, no matter how much it impacts them. Yes, a bit of a rant there, but the point is that, yeah, it is all too much about sort of drip feed, giving stuff to just about win rather than packing it all up front, having a victory and allowing the Ukrainians to properly win. Now, the issue with any of these ideas is, well, what would the ramification be, and would that have caused Russia to have reacted far more seriously with something like tactical nukes and whatnot? So, like I've said to you before, if Ukraine were able to win a quick, decisive victory, there are arguments to say that actually Russia would just be in a position to be able to come back and get a second bite of the apple relatively quickly, and it wouldn't have solved anything on a long-term sort of scale. At the moment, at the expense of Ukrainian lives, the Russians are being degraded to an absolutely fundamental level. And I don't know whether this is actually the aim of, say, the Americans. There have been claims about this. I've talked about this. I talked about this right at the beginning of the war because Lloyd Austin said something in April. Goodness me, was it April 2022? Was it 23? I can't remember, where he said, we want this war to mean that Russia can't do this again in a kind of generations time type thing. I forget the exact words, but it was the idea was, we want this war to be prosecuted in a way that Russia is completely unable to replicate this, and the only way of doing that is to fundamentally degrade them over a protracted conflict to the degree that they're being degraded at the moment. They're getting out M46 howitzers and APS whatever they are, those like tractors that they're digging out from like the 50s or whatever. Then you're thinking, my goodness, like, they can't commit to another major conflict in a serious way without rebuilding their entire conventional ground forces over a sort of 20-30 year period. It's not going to happen. They'll have a massive labour shortage. You can't have no economy and a massive armed forces, or a massive economy. Is going to be one or the other. You try and revamp your economy, but you aren't going to be able to put in 500,000 people into your armed forces to revamp it to be able to go again. So it's this spinning plates thing that the Russians are experiencing at the moment, where they can't do everything. You've got dams breaking all across Russia, and you've got infrastructural issues, you've got welfare state issues, and they're trying to spin all these plates and they're dropping them all because the main big plate they're trying to spin is the only one they're really concentrating on, is that war effort in Ukraine, and it is just costing them in terms of drop plates. Yeah, so, but I digress. The point being that a quick victory would have allowed Russia to go again, and also might have forced Russia into reacting far more fundamentally earlier, such as with tactical nukes. So I think I agree with Andrew, but there are some caveats to apply here, and this is why there are, trying to make really wide sweeping claims concerning this war is always problematic because nothing's so obviously true. They're always, it's kind of, everything's a dilemma. Well, if we do this and we can't do that, or we do that, then we can't do this, but we'd like to do that, so which is the best option or the least worst option, or, everything comes with, yeah, we've done that. However, the drawbacks are this, this, and this. And so I think it's easy to blame the states for not doing everything soon enough, but then there are drawbacks to the idea of having, had they done those things. It's complicated. War is complicated, especially when it's intertwined with geopolitics and economics and information wars and information influence projects and so on and so forth. Yes, so where I get really frustrated is in terms of like restricting the Ukrainian ability to strike airfields and stuff like that. That should have been allowed much earlier on, and I'm sure it wouldn't have been escalatory. And also just more equipment than they had been given. I'm not necessarily saying flood them, but just, there's 7 months of the congressional impasse was absolutely terrible for the Ukrainians. And I think, it's largely why they're in such a problematic position at the moment on the Pokrovsk front. I think that's why Avdiivka fell. There was no real answer to the guided glide bombs, but when you've also run out of ammunition, you've got no Stingers to shoot down those close air support aircraft, and no ability to take out the aircraft further behind the front line, then you are going to lose large amounts of land. But in that context, it's worth looking at the American aid packages that are just, and I say packages, that are just about to be released to Ukraine. First thing to note being that they're going to get Ukrainians are going to get a $200 million aid package from Presidential Drawdown Authority, which means this is going to come straight from US stocks and it will be able to get there pretty darned quickly. That includes RIM 7 missiles for air defense. So those are the ship-to-air missiles that have been able to be used on Buk air defense launchers. So they're Franken-SAM. You've got NASAMS missiles, short and medium-range air defense munitions, electronic warfare equipment, HIMARS ammunition, mortar and artillery rounds, precision aerial munitions, tube-launched, optically tracked wire-guided, so TOW missiles. Those are for the Bradleys, Javelin 84 anti-armor system. A lot of stuff we always see. The equipment that needs to be provided on a regular basis to allow the Ukrainians to just do their normal war kind of stuff. Explosives, material and demolitions equipment and munitions, secure comm systems, commercial satellite imagery services, interesting, and spare parts, maintenance and sustainment support and other ancillary equipment. Okay. In addition, says Noel reports, to announcing a significant package of support using, the DoD, Department of Defense, is announcing a significant package of support using approximately $1.5 billion in the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative funds. So those are the USAI funds that are used to order munitions from predominantly American industry. The package includes capabilities to augment Ukraine's air defenses, fires, and anti-tank weapons, as well as funding to sustain equipment previously committed by the US. So that's a big old bunch of money there. And there's the release from the Biden administration. Who knows what that'd be put towards, but I assume Patriots are going to be part of that, etc., etc. So effectively almost $2 billion worth of equipment. Excellent stuff. Of course, could it have come earlier? Yes. All those arguments will still apply. German military aid to Ukraine has been updated with, so this is the last 3 weeks, this is what the Germans have delivered to Ukraine. So 8 Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks, and this is one of the tanks that they're going to continue receiving a number of, because the Germans particularly are updating or refurbishing a bunch of these. I think, how many... in total are they due to receive? 155 in total, something like that. They've received, goodness knows how many they have actually received, but that's going to be a tank that they're going to continue getting. Some of them were sent back. They weren't up to scratch really when they were initially given to Ukraine, and so there's been this sort of continual process to get them indeed up to scratch. 10 Sonarbot, 5 USVs, unmanned surface vehicles. They are for, I think, finding out their mines below, and very useful for maritime exercises. 2 Bergerpanzer ARVs, armor recovery vehicle. 10 ground surveillance radars, the Ground Observer 12. 21,000, not sure, those are helmets. 21,000 APDST rounds for Gepard and Cheetah Spag, so that's very useful. 24,810 M92 helmets there, could be very useful, can protect you from dying. As you can see there's the Bergerpanzer 2. And then 1 forward surgical team system, role 1 already known. So there you go, and that's the Leopard 1A5 main battle tank. So good support from the Germans continuing to take place. The Czech Republic, so Czechia is considering creating a Ukrainian legion similar to that which Poland is doing, training Ukrainians abroad for service in Ukraine's defence forces. The Czech Ministry of Defence is evaluating the Polish initiative and gathering information before deciding on their involvement. Training participation would be voluntary, with over 100,000 Ukrainian men aged 18 to 65 currently residing in the Czech Republic. I mean, goodness me, that is essentially 100,000 people who could potentially be forming Ukrainian units. And that's just one country. So the scale of the problem for Ukraine in terms of having lost a lot of fighting age men is definitely something that could be brought into focus. And goodness me, there's so much. They're missing so many men. I remember Greg Terry saying that he reckoned the real population for Ukraine, instead of being 44 million, was somewhere near 28 million. Like, they really have lost an awful lot of people. Now, a lot of those are women and children fleeing as refugees, of course, but a lot of them men as well. As I reported earlier, there are claims that there's an F-16 over the skies of Ukraine. I have no idea whether that's true, but it is a persistent rumour that we're hearing. We're hearing that they may be operating out of Romania into Ukrainian airspace and returning to Romania. Who knows if that's true? Latvia's Foreign Minister, Baiba Braze, let's see who that... Yep, that appears to be... account suspended. Interesting. Raises 14,000 euros in a charity run. Buys 100 drones for Ukraine, destined for units near Kramatorsk. Latvia co-leads a drone coalition aiming to provide 1 million drones to Ukraine by the year end. Ukraine has received 300 plus Latvian drones so far. And whenever I give you information on stuff like this, I always follow it up with, and what foreign minister is doing this for Russia? And what charity is raising funds and equipment for Russia in the same way that international charities and people are doing for Ukraine? I think it's a really interesting asymmetry there. Euromaidan Press reports that, and I don't know whether this is at all important for any... This is reflective, I think, of the threat that Russia is posing to European stability. The US is moving tanks and infantry fighting vehicles from Germany to a base in Poland. I don't think this has anything to do with providing Ukraine with equipment. This is likely US equipment that they are keeping themselves, but maybe moving to Poland just in case things go wrong. Residents of Western Poland are witnessing an increase in US military vehicle traffic as the army relocates equipment from German bases to new facilities in Police. But it could be that those are pieces of kit that are eventually going to find their way to Ukraine. Who knows? Then fighter bomb. Now, I reported on this earlier in my first video, so I don't want to repeat all of the claims, but the general point is that fighter bomb and this aviation actually serving pilot, I think, in the Russian VKS, has said that a motor rifle regiment has been created from the personnel of the Russian Aerospace Forces, the VKS, to participate in the war in Ukraine. The unit is reportedly manned by gunners, radio operators, mechanics, airfield maintenance personnel, and flight personnel, which served in the VKS. He attached footage allegedly showing the training and operations of the regiment in the combat zone in Ukraine, including FPV drone strikes. Now, this is, I think, incredibly important to note. So Russia, I think, are in huge they're facing huge problems at the moment in terms of personnel. They don't want to do a second wave of mobilization because it'd be deeply unpopular and it'll cause a lot of people to flee the country. And you've got a massive labor shortage that's already caused a wage inflation spiral. And I think that would be exacerbated even further, and I think it will have dire economic consequences with an economy that is incredibly fragile at the moment. And we've heard the head economic honcho saying that actually all their resources are exhausted in terms of the ways that they can keep a handle on the economy. It is a second wave of mobilization would be possibly economic and political suicide, but there is no other option realistically that is going to allow Russia to continue prosecuting the war in the way that it's doing at the moment. So they are facing a real issue, and what they're doing is crypto and klepto, what I call klepto mobilization. Crypto mobilization is mobilizing without officially saying. You are also kind of under the radar mobilizing and getting people. We're hearing that they've increased the wages now of not only people, we'll come to this in a second, not only for the people, for soldiers that they recruit, trying to attract people in from, say, the Moscow regions with insanely high wages, but they're actually putting them up all across Russia. So they're really desperately trying to get people to volunteer by attracting them in, but that's going to cost. It's going to cost their economy. In moving people from often private jobs, so where they are taxpayers, into the economy, and you're moving them into the public sector where you're paying them not only not getting their tax from what they were getting before. Actually, you will be getting tax back, but these were net contributors to be people who are net drainers on the economy, because not only are you moving them from private to public, but you're paying them the entirety of their wages, and those wages are really high, and then you have to compensate their families when they die. Or through injury. And so it's a very expensive process to move people, even if they're volunteers, from the private sector to the public sector and send them off to war. But those are, and you're stealing people from abroad and you're attracting people with the offer of visas, and then you're getting them, through some kind of minor misdemeanor or some kind of paperwork issue that they haven't done. You then nick them and send them off to the front lines in Ukraine. So all of these ways of trying to get people to fight for Russia on the front lines. And then you have the situation whereby, okay, so we also have this pool of people in the Russian Air Forces. The Russian Air Force is large, but it's essentially being not so much underused. I don't know if underused is the right word. They aren't all committed to the front lines in Ukraine. So they're still doing Air Forcey stuff around here, and also in the Air Force infrastructure around Ukraine, you've also got a lot of people just doing logistics or maybe paperwork or maintenance, and so they're taking those Air Force people and putting them in infantry units because they're so desperate for infantry units to send into the front line. And we're also hearing, as a response to fighter bomber, that they're also doing this with the Navy. So they're taking naval personnel and they're putting them into naval infantry units, Marines, and saying, right, normally you'd be on these ships or doing this in the port or whatever, and then putting them into Marine units and sending them to the front line. And so they're every single way that they can possibly get fighting men onto the front line, they are doing it. Remember, they have pretty much exhausted the prison populations. They are supposedly moving on to female prison populations as well. All of this indicates that Russia is in a very desperate situation. Now, you will then start seeing possibly a desire for them to get to the negotiating table if they realise, well, they've got two choices. It's negotiation or second wave of mobilisation. That is it. If Russia want to get as much out of this war as they possibly can, they either win the war more, So they take even more territory and try and get some of those objectives like Odessa or get to Dnipro River or whatever those objectives now are. You can only do that through mobilization, or you try and get as much as you can through negotiation. So those are the two options. There are no other options as far as I'm concerned. And what they're trying to do is put off for as long as possible making those one of those two choices by eking out as much as they can from every corner of society, and not always their own society. So as someone says here, if you're taking aircrew and mechanics for your planes and turning them into infantry, you're going to have a bad time. I mean, this is indicative of a real desperation. More signals that Russian recruiters may be struggling to attract soldiers for the Ukrainian war, or the Ukraine war. More regions, 9 and counting, are upping cash rewards and incentives for referrals. In Yaroslavl and Tatarstan, 100,000 rubles for referring someone to per Verstka media. And this is, authorities are further increasing payments, wages and other benefits in order to attract new recruits. Another sign that Russia recruiting of volunteer contractniki soldiers to fight in Ukraine is slowing down. We should pause before using the word struggling. They might be unable to meet quota at current incentive rates, but dialing up incentives has consistently worked to keep recruitment rates up at or near 20 to 30,000 per month. It's the intake, not the incentive level, that matters. And that, although that's a absolutely bang on point, they are just, if you are still able to recruit at 20 to 30,000 people per month, you are taking them out of your economy. Okay, some of them are going to come from abroad, but most of them are going to come from Russia. There's no way that this is going to end well for Russia, either economically, socially, or politically, militarily. This is a war that's surely going to put some serious nails in a Russian Federation's coffin. Now, aside from their issues with personnel, they are having issues with equipment. As claimed, North Korean Bullseye 4 in service with the Russian army was seen at the border region with Kharkiv. Okay, not 100% sure about this, but there are claims that you are starting to see North Korean military equipment, not just shells and missiles being used, but actual materiel here. Status 6 says a vehicle strongly resembling North Korean Bullseye 4 mobile NLOS ATGM launcher was spotted in the Kharkiv front in Ukraine. This would be the first confirmed case of a North Korean military vehicle being employed by the Russians. OSINT UA said that the vehicle managed to launch 6 missiles before leaving. If that is the case, then are they surely not answerable to the United Nations in terms of resolutions? This is a very close military tie to a heavily sanctioned nation of North Korea. I mean, already they've got away with possibly taking 5 million rounds from the North Koreans. This is just adding insult to injury, and possibly death to insult to injury. There's quite a bit of talk this morning about, and it could just be Russian propaganda, but the idea that the Russians are creating or working on an Iskander 1000 ballistic missile. So already they have an Iskander missile that is doing lots of damage to the Ukrainians, but they are possibly going to have one with a 1,000-kilometer range, which means that they could safely launch out from way back in Russia, but also be able to hit anywhere in Ukraine pretty much with Iskanders. That's the modified warhead they're working on, according to Defense Express. So whether that is going to turn up anytime soon, I don't know, but it would be the sort of thing you'd imagine them to be working on. It seems entirely plausible and actually sensible, but it's a worry for Ukraine if that is indeed going to be the case. Now, this is not apropos to the war in Ukraine, but interesting military decision-making potentially going to take place. Britain will make a decision on banning arms sales to Israel later this summer after officials were ordered to review evidence of potential war crimes from the fighting in Gaza. The Times understands that the process will take longer because ministers are seeking to suspend export licenses for specific weapons that they can link to suspected war crimes. Investigations are expected to take weeks. you might see a move in with the Labour Party in the UK, because they have very strong Jewish support, but they also have a very strong Muslim contingent, particularly up north, and trying to balance those two parts of the electorate is going to be very difficult for the ruling administration in the UK, and trying to navigate the war in Israel is going to be challenging. But if a decision does get made, I wonder if, depends how the election goes in the US, I wonder if that then would affect any decision making in the US, and I wonder if that would ever have any knock-on effect to provision of stuff to Ukraine. Whether, like, if, say for example, the US just said, okay, we're gonna dial down on what we give to Israel. It's a bit problematic. Would that leave more scope for giving more to Ukraine? I don't know. That's just pie in the sky thinking there. But interesting developments from the UK, that's for sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and speak to you soon. Toodle pits.